Hello and welcome to Again and NonGay. I'm James Barr, I'm gay, and that's Dan Hudson.
Yes, and I am non-gay.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
I'm actually very excited about today's episode because we're joined by a friend of mine. We've been wanting to do this episode for maybe a year, and it's taken that long to get us in the same room. But also, Harry and I met at a party.
Right.
In East London, right?
That's right, yeah.
So this is like a few different worlds crossing over at the same time. And Harry was telling me about his book, which is finally coming out this September. But
September 25th. Yeah.
Okay.
But you can pre-order it, and you are going to want to.
So as a teenager, he was an evangelical Christian, and he believed that homosexuality, as many do, that homosexuality was a sin.
But not me or you.
I don't know if that I've not believed that at points, like not in recent history.
No,
but,
right.
You know, I think a lot of people have grown up thinking that. Anyway, moving on. Then he was an atheist, and now he's back again in the world of spirituality and religion, and he lives a fulfilled gay life in London. And he's writing and teaching about ancient languages and history. And his book, the aforementioned book, is called The Queer Thing About Sin, which uncovers the origins of homophobia and the stories of those people who loved each other in the ancient times.
So, in a nutshell, it's basically a book about how the West invented homophobia and weaponized homophobia.
That's entirely right. I mean, I think the question has always been, you've got some camps that are sort of pro-gay, pro-queer, and then you've got camps who are anti-queer. And there's no history of where that homophobia came from. Why do we look at the Bible? Why does the Bible say what it says? Why do you have evangelical Christians? Why do you have conservatives who have these abhorrent points of view? Why? Where does that come from? And that's the history that I went looking for, couldn't find, so I wrote it.
And you went quite far back to find this shit. Like, you learned Latin at school, is that right?
Yeah.
And then so you can read these texts.
Sure. So that's the other thing, right? You've got the Bible bashing evangelical Christians. You've got the sort who are part of the Republican Party now, and actually parts of the far right in Britain, who think they've read their Bible. They've read their Bible in English. I've read it in Greek. I've read it in Hebrew. I've read the latter translations in Latin, and I think it's time that we did an exploration of where that stuff actually came from a place of expertise. There's a lot of people who talk a lot of nonsense about this.
Reading the book, Dan has read more than me. I struggle to read, I think, as you know. Reading the book, I was in bed, and I had to probably about every 30 seconds, I would ask my smart speaker the definition of a word so I could understand what you were saying. But it's incredibly powerful and moving reading it, especially the foreword where you talk about your own experience and how, in a way, gay conversion therapy made you decide to do this. Like, your own experience in like with homophobia made you decide that it was bullshit. And then hearing about gay sex in ancient Greece. I mean, what's the best thing you could tell us about gay sex back in ancient Greece?
I think the coolest thing is that we have these pots, right, which basically show porn on them.
Porn pots.
Porn pots. There are loads of like the Warren Cup at the British Library. My favourite porn pot.
British Museum, yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no. The Warren. Well, that is a porn pot from ancient Rome, but in ancient Greece, you had this whole industry. They were manufacturing these pots with these guys fucking on it. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, we got a BBC guy filming us today, so.
Dear. Okay, sorry.
You can say fucking as much as you want.
But yeah, these guys are having sex on it. They're lining up in front of each other. But the really mysterious thing for me as a researcher, so my PhD was in kind of ancient Greek, ancient history. As a researcher, the fascinating thing is, when did they stop? And they stop quite abruptly. They stop making them in about the year 450 BCE. And it's pretty much overnight. This huge number of porn pots stop being produced. It's like someone suddenly said, okay, we're going to shut down all gay porn.
Yeah.
It's just going to be
But
banned.
was it
Why?
porn?
That's an interesting question. We don't know exactly what it was, but it's incredibly explicit. It would have been part of people's drinking and dining. People would have dined, they had a porn pot right in the center, which we think is kind of weird. Were they actually finding it erotically interesting? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows. That's one of the things about the ancient world. But the fact is they were making them, and they were making them showing gay sex on them. So there must have been some kind of tolerance, but they stopped. And that's the really interesting thing for me. Why? We need to know that, because we're living in a time right now when we have equal marriage for the moment. We have all sorts of protections for bi and gay men and women. We have very few protections now for trans people. We need to know when that's going to stop. And I think we've lulled ourselves into this idea that we live in this unique moment in history. We have kind of reinvented queer rights. No, it's happened before. I could tell you about Boston, Massachusetts. I could tell you about Florence just after the Black Death. There have been times before when queer liberation has exploded and then it stopped. And it's really important we know why. So what happened around that 450 BC mark? That's what interests me as an historian.
So are you convinced then that at some point in the future, be it 10, 15, 100 years, that we are just going to go back round in a circle and this stuff is all cyclical?
I don't think it is inevitable. It depends on what is going on politically. It depends on what is going on in the economy. It's not inevitable, but a pattern has repeated itself throughout history, and it's one we need to watch for and we're not looking at.
It's actually terrifying hearing you say that. I'm actually terrified to dive in now. That's scary. I mean, when I asked you what was gay sex like in ancient Greece, I was kind of just expecting you to say, oh my God, well, there were no condoms.
Well, we know that there were condoms in antiquity, actually.
Really?
Yeah, there were. They found little bits of sheep intestine at the site of Pompeii, for instance, in the brothel, and we think that those might have been used as condoms.
And would that be a good method of contraception?
That's not a question for me. Different kind of doctor.
Why does the economy have such an impact on LGBT rights?
I think if you look, without giving away too much of the book, I think if you look at modern conservatism, one of the questions that really interested me in, I suppose, when I was just coming out of evangelism was, what is that correlation? What is that coincidence between people like Margaret Thatcher, who are really about cut in the economy, make the government as small as possible, and also they seem to really hate gay people? That turned out not to be a coincidence. That's been happening for thousands of years, and that surprised me.
Is that the same in the Trump administration? Because they are very interested in cutting.
I think so, but the really interesting question there is, there are members of the Trump administration who are gay. Instead, it seems that trans people are taking the brunt of the attack this time. That has happened before. Trans people are actually... One of the things about writing a history like this that's really hard, and it's quite upsetting as an historian, is the evidence for lesbian lives, the evidence for trans lives is small. They do exist. You do see them in antiquity. You do see them in the Middle Ages. There's a wonderful bit of history I uncovered where you had trans men who were going into monasteries, were undergoing practices whereby they starved themselves as a dedication to God. This had the side effect of stopping them menstruating and reducing their breast size. We have lots and lots of different accounts of these trans people who pretended to be men, masqueraded as men in the days long before we had gender confirmation surgery. And they lived out their lives authentically as men, and it was discovered upon their death that, at least in contemporary words, they were not. I think when you discover stories like that, that's a really exciting moment as an historian, because it tells you that part of the right-wing agenda today in the LGBT right-wing camp, which sort of says, you know, gay, bi, lesbian, great, but trans, no, not interested. And trans people have somehow been attached to LGBT somewhere in the 1960s. That's not true. The patterns throughout history which have dictated what happens to LGBT people have dictated what happened to trans people as well. I've documented that pretty extensively in the book. So trans people are taking the brunt now, but, you know, you wait. There is more coming.
Let's go back just to the ancient history for a second. I asked you about gay sex, but I think it's important to make a distinction between men having sex and also men being in love with each other. And there are some quite incredible examples that you've found and that are in your book where you talk about male love. I just wonder if there's anything that you uncovered personally that surprised you or made you swoon.
I think one of the most amazing things, I was sitting in the British Library where I do a lot of my research, and I was reading some letters that had been written in Boston, Massachusetts, between two men who lived together and loved each other. And I'm going to misquote, but it was something like, "And the prospect of resting with you forever, that would be heavenly, my dear Joseph." He had that written down from the 1700s. And you can actually see someone's love letter from a cohabiting, loving couple. That's an extraordinary thing. And you've also got letters from lesbians to each other as well. There's a wonderful book that collects all those letters, if you ever want to go and look it up, called Improper Bostonians. It's a fantastic title.
But even going further back, there's a story in the book, you talk about a porn pot, but it's a man under a cloak.
Yeah. Okay, so we think that in ancient Boeotia, which is a region of Greece, that something like gay marriage was taking place. You have two men there who seem to be of a very similar age, and they're shrouded by a cloak. This is a symbol of marriage in the ancient world. The cloak has little scratched patterns on it of swastikas, which long before Nazism were a symbol of peace. And they are clasping hands and they are looking at each other. We have ancient testimony of marriages in the region, or marriage-like ceremonies in the region. It's entirely possible that what we're looking at is an ancient marriage ceremony. Certainly a lot of scholars think so. We tend to think that equal marriage is something we've invented, as something that exists in the modern world. And that gives us a kind of comfort. It makes us think that this is going to last forever. It might not.
There was a passage that I laughed out loud whilst reading. Whenever he found a particularly large throng of people, he walked into their midst and farted. He enjoyed farting so much that he is said to have written an entire treatise on the matter, pithily called On Farting. When a passing young man cried out in rage at the philosopher for letting out a particularly whiffy fart, Diogenes jabbed him with his stick. The sin, fool, is not the fart, but in failing to understand that farts are natural. What is that about?
Oh, that's Diogenes the Cynic. Yeah, right. So that is about how, I mean, you hear in the modern world that gay sex is not natural.
Yeah.
Nobody really probes this discussion very much. Why are they so obsessed with nature? They don't appear obsessed with that when they're on a plane or they're using a phone or anything like that. And nature doesn't seem to concern them except when they are attacking gay sex.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give a history, which is what that is, of where this idea of nature came from. And Diogenes the Cynic was one of the first people who was obsessed with nature. He used to go around farting and masturbating in public.
What?
Yeah, quite deliberately. And he used to annoy people doing this. And whenever they asked him, "Why are you farting? Why are you masturbating?" he would say, "Because it is natural."
Yeah.
And this is sort of the
better out than in, right?
Yeah, well, precisely. Although actually his real explanation of why he was masturbating so much in front of people, the real reason why he was doing this was he used to say that it was ridiculous that you would pay a prostitute to relieve you. That was extravagant, he thought. Instead, he could just masturbate in public.
So, like, why would you order Uber Eats when you could just cook dinner for yourself?
Supposedly, yes. And that's actually really interesting because there's a form of economic conservatism in that too. Why would you spend that money? And there's that idea reflected in the sexual relationship Diogenes is talking about. Interestingly enough, there is a school of scholars that think, without a huge amount of evidence, but think that Jesus Christ was influenced by Diogenes the Cynic. To my knowledge, Jesus didn't go around masturbating and farting, But that's why that's a really important part of the book. Diogenes formed so many of those ideas about nature that built up modern Christianity.
So before we get to Jesus, how did the homophobia kick in? Because I know that obviously, well, I guess Big J had something to do with that, perhaps.
No.
Right.
No, I can say a pretty emphatic no on that. There is no part of the Bible in which Jesus condemns gay sex or gay love. As I argue in the book, and it's a pretty at length discussion, but Jesus may even have said things that condoned were in favor of gay sex. You have to be careful about saying things like that. You know, you'll notice it's a feature of the firebrand Christians that they'll say, this is so, that is so. Well, we don't know. We're talking about things that were thousands of years ago, and it's okay to say that we don't really know. But we do know for certain that there is no part of the Bible where Jesus actively condemns it. St. Paul does, and we can talk about that too, but Jesus doesn't. And he does seem to say something that could be interpreted as being in favor of it.
Which is?
He's asked about marriage and a marriage to a woman, and he gives a series of exemptions to that. I explain in detail in the book what those exemptions are, but it's quite hard to explain, I think, on air that. But
when do you feel that homophobia, or the first round of homophobia that we know of in the ancient world, kicked in?
Okay, so in ancient Greece, I think it's around the 420s. We have the text of Leviticus, that famous Leviticus 18:22, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is an abomination. That's older. We don't know exactly how much older, probably about 100 years, maybe 200 years older than that. Actually, just as a side note on that, I find it astonishing as an ancient linguist and an ancient historian, how many times that is cited in courts, how many times that is cited with authority, and yet we don't know who wrote it. We haven't got a clue when it was written. We're hundreds of years apart. We don't know. We don't even really know what the Hebrew means. It seems that ancient Egypt wasn't too friendly. We don't know again exactly when and where, but those are some of the oldest forms of homophobia. One thing we can say for absolute certain, which is we know from the literature on animals that gay sex and gay love are part of the animal kingdom in many, many different species. To my knowledge, and having looked into this, we are the only species that exhibits homophobia.
That's crazy. This made me think of something that you've written in the book, which is the more obscure text origins, apparently the more burnished its credentials. And why do you think that is?
Oh, I think everyone loves a mystery.
Right.
And I think when you can't say, ooh, who wrote that Leviticus text, and you can't clearly say it was written by St. Paul in this year.
Yeah.
It seems, well, maybe God has something to do with it. You know, maybe Moses had something to do with it. Maybe this person has something to do with it. Maybe that person has something to do with it. And the problem that we don't talk about enough, which is Hebrew, the language in which that text is written, is a very difficult language to understand because we don't have a lot of it. And it was written by people thousands of years ago. And I go to all sorts of scholarly conferences and have discussions with people about the intricacies of what this stuff means. Nobody is absolutely clear. And I think when I was a teenager reading that Bible, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, the underlying assumption was we know that's what it means.
Yeah.
I am here with a PhD to tell you we don't know. And anyone who is claiming that we do is a liar. That's a really important thing.
I thought it was written by someone called Leviticus. Is that not?
I mean, that's a fair assumption to make,
Is
right?
that not actually a person?
These are the law codes. We don't know who actually. We don't know
Well, why
who
the
was
hell is it
responsible.
in the Bible?
So let's talk also about the New Testament. Let's talk about how the Gospels of Jesus were written. I think it's worthwhile people know this. I lay this out in the book. But again, when I was a teenager, I assumed that these were the words of Jesus. No.
Oh, God.
We think we know that they were written down for the first time. The Gospel of Mark is usually cited as one of the earliest. We know that they were written down decades after Jesus's death. We know, and this is an age where people didn't really write very much, when there certainly wasn't any social media or anything. What seems to have happened...
So there's no record of anything, really?
No, there's no record. It seems that the stories were circulated. It's like you and I were having a conversation down the pub, I don't know, in Soho or something, and somewhere reprobates go. Anyway, and we're having a chat about it, and then you have a chat with someone else, and someone else has a chat with someone else, and someone else has a chat with someone else, and then a couple of decades later, some guys in Antioch think, maybe we should write this down. So they do.
Yeah.
That's not the only record of what Jesus said. There are lots of gospels of Jesus, like the Gospel of Thomas and the secret Gospel of Mark, for instance, which did not make it into the Bible. And there are lots of fun stories about Jesus running around as a child in a creche, like making little things go puff, performing little magic spells, that didn't make it into the Bible for some reason. The Bible also contradicts itself in Jesus. It gives a different lineage of Christ, gives different birth order of Christ. So all of these things, you get the impression when you're a teenager that you can read this stuff literally. You can't. It's the job of scholars to piece it together, and it's not easy, but we can't say anything for absolute certain. And there are lots of great stories, and there are lots of great stories about what things could have been in the Bible. And one of my favorites is what Jesus may have got up to with another man, which was a manuscript that was discovered in the 20th century. I discuss in the book whether that's something we can take seriously. But
so do you think Jesus did have a penchant for gay sex?
No, I don't know. What I do think is that it's very likely some people thought he did in the ancient world. I also think that this was a man who was surrounded by other men and who lived an itinerant lifestyle. Take from that what you will.
We do know that he was like friends with prostitutes, for example, right? Or is
Talking
that
about Mary Magdalene?
Yeah.
Yeah. We know that he associated himself with all kinds of things. You have to be very careful as an ancient historian it's very easy in the modern world. We think to ourselves, okay, he associated with prostitutes, he lived alone, so he didn't have a wife or anything like that. So therefore, he must have been this, because that's how we reason in the modern world. We've got to be very careful. There were lots of people like Diogenes the Cynic, he of farting fame that we spoke about before, who he didn't marry. There are lots of people who didn't marry in the ancient world. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were gay. But I will say this, if the people composing the ancient sources wanted to go out of their way to tell us he wasn't gay, they did a very bad job of that.
I wasn't necessarily saying that he was gay. I was saying that...
To be clear, I don't think...
Yeah.
I will not be drawn on this. I don't think that he was. And the much more important question is... how did Christianity become hijacked then by the homophobes? That's much more important question.
Can we talk about that? How did that happen? Because I still don't know if I've really understood how homophobia began.
Has it not just always been around?
Oh no, I don't think it's always been around. I think that it appears under certain societal conditions. It's a case of, you see the pattern again and again and again throughout the book, right? You have certain crises, and then it's followed by homophobia.
It's the age-old thing of blaming someone else for the problems, isn't it?
No, I don't believe that.
No?
I don't believe that. I don't think that's quite right. I don't think it is just about finding a scapegoat, because you have to ask, why is it LGBT people who are the scapegoat?
So why and where did it come from, do you think?
I think, as I've said, I think it comes from how people deal with money and excess. Does a society embrace excess, or does a society condemn excess? Does a society say, we like people who are eccentric, or does a society say that people who are outside of the norms are bad? That's what it comes down to. And it comes down to the forces that are pressurizing them to do those things. I think also it's important to mark the relationship in the modern world between conservative Christianity and money. There is a very close relationship between people's sense of their own, when they feel poor, and their own sense of shame. This is very well documented in the LGBT community. I think it's probably, I don't know, I think it's probably the same for straight people as well. Am I wrong in that regard?
You've lost me slightly.
If you do not have so much money, if you're poor, how does that affect your sense of sexuality? How does that affect your sense of shame?
I don't know. I've never been poor. Not like actually. I don't know. I mean, it's a really.
But I can see what Harry's trying to say. I think. I mean, but
he's too clever for like.
Harry is
both of us.
So clever, and I'm amazed that you've been like you're so intellectual. Dan to me is like
even I'm flawed. Yeah, I'd say I'm not intellectual at all.
To me
at all.
To me,
to James,
my version.
It would be ridiculous. Ridiculous to sit here with Harry and go, "I'm an intellectual."
No.
Harry's rolling his eyes massively. Hold on. What I'm trying to say is, I think I understand, and Harry's going to tell me that I'm wrong. But you're saying that if someone, it goes back to that that example we had earlier in this chat. Like if you look at someone else and they're using a prostitute.
Yeah.
Like it's cheaper to do it on your own, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you might judge someone paying and wasting that money on a prostitute. So
that's exactly it.
It's that, right? You're saying that if you feel as though you're poor and your life is shit, you're annoyed by someone else.
Yeah.
And dating costs money, right? We also have this idea that we've inherited from the ancient world that gay people and trans people certainly are extravagant individuals. Something we lean into, right? We love those sparkly tops. We love the glitter. We love the extravagance. We've come to own it, but we don't question why. The other thing that we don't talk about is how conservative LGBT people really hate that. They get really upset.
Well, I'm sat here with my nails done. There's a lot of moments where I kind of feel like I wish I didn't have my nails done and actually just want to hide. But I have that instinctive... I know that I should be fabulous or that I want to wear a sparkly top.
You feel that pressure to feel fabulous.
There's like a drive to that. There's a pressure. And I think it comes down to, we feel that we have to protect ourselves. So we become more extravagant. We lean in further.
And that extravagance is associated in many people's minds with stepping outside certain boundaries. And if you live a life where you have to maintain boundaries because you are poor, you are going to feel really angry at those people who you feel are stepping outside of those boundaries. That's going to make you enraged in the same way that the people who are most angry about women's fertility rights are often people who feel that they've played by the rules all their life. They were good people. They didn't have too much sex. They didn't take too many risks.
Yeah.
And they are furious that people in their eyes are able to get away with this because they've played by the rules.
Yeah.
And I think that fury at other people stepping outside of boundaries, that rage, that's what I've been trying to document in the book.
I guess I can give you an example from the straight world with regards to what you just said, which is that people who have children definitely exhibit those symptoms towards straight people who don't.
Interesting.
Do you know? Does that make sense?
But I mean, don't be bitter. Be better.
Well, yeah.
Right?
I'm not bitter.
Like, if you're jealous of all the people out there having gay sex, go and have gay sex.
Yeah.
But I think to that point, gay sex has been a really useful thing for religions to, and political parties to weaponize, because 90% of the population are perfectly happy without it. Right? I think we also need to we talk a lot about gay sex here. We need to make a distinction too, which is just because people are able to have gay sex, it doesn't mean their right to love is protected. That's the other thing. We went decades in this country and decades in many countries in the West where it was perfectly legal to have sex, but there was nothing like recognition for those people to love each other, to cohabit, to have ordinary lives. And what does that do? That pushes those people who are having gay sex to have more of it because they cannot have a recognized lifestyle where they live in normal houses and have normal families.
And actually, I think, not that I have any shame about the amount of gay sex that I personally have, but I think that's probably one of the major, that's one of the worst things about Section 28, like growing up with that I experience, in that even now, whilst we can have gay marriage, I sort of see that sometimes, gosh, this is a thing to admit, as a bit of an inferior choice, because it's like, why would I want to do what straight people are doing? I'm gay and I want to go and have as much gay sex as possible. I'm almost like stuck in that rhythm because that's what society taught me. It taught me that I wasn't allowed to have love.
Yeah, well,
It's weird that.
you are allowed to have love.
So you left the church and became an atheist, but now you're back in
Quite an angry atheist.
an angry atheist.
Oh yeah,
That Christopher Hitchens guy.
love a bit of Christopher Hitchens.
But you're back in the game now, right? Is that
yeah,
is
I
that
decided to go back to church.
and what made you do that?
Writing the book.
Right. Okay.
There's something about writing a book that there was a catharsis in it. There was I get where that came from now. I can dissociate that.
You said something to me that you probably wouldn't want to repeat here about why you went back to church, because I questioned it at the time.
I don't remember what I said.
Oh, it was actually one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, but also damning. You said going to watch a film, you realise the movies aren't real, but you still go and watch them because it's a nice story. And that's sort of how you described the church. It gave you something to believe in. Or
That's totally it. I think that was one of the things that I wish I'd known as a teenager, which is you don't have to believe this stuff is real. You don't have to believe he's absolutely up there in the sky. You can tap into that sense of love that you have for all of your friends, for your family, if they're still there, for those that are dead and gone, for everything that you've done and seen in the world. And that sudden sense of joy, of love, of connection, you can call that God if you like. And if going to church or synagogue or mosque helps you to explore that feeling, whatever helps you to explore that feeling, you have at it. Doesn't matter whether you think it's real or not. That was one of the things in my angry atheist phase. It's one of the things that people like Christopher Hitchens sort of got quite wrong, I think. Of course it's not real. Of course it's not real. That's kind of a silly discussion. The question is what do we do now? Alain de Botton's written about this in his Religion for Atheists. That's pretty much how he begins that book. Well, it's obvious it's not real. What now? What do we do now? That's really the question for all of us. For me, it helped me cultivate that sense of love. And I'd really missed the church. I'd really missed the nice bits of the church. So it's nice to be back. But I don't believe God is in the sky. I don't believe that he gives me commandments. And so I don't really...
That he hates gay people.
No, I don't really believe that. That seems nonsensical to me.
I think that's probably, I don't know, I'm not a scholar, but I imagine
Are you not?
that's probably not even the right word. I don't imagine even at the time, especially decades after Jesus' death when these books were being compiled, I don't imagine even at the time people necessarily believed them as a fixed story. Surely the whole idea of it was that it was stories and everyone was like, believing in something.
No.
It was just a movie, but of its time.
Yeah, that's precisely it. I think it was a series of stories. If you went to an ancient church of the 1st century CE, these little church communities that were springing up all across the Mediterranean, they would have been telling stories about Christ and about his life. And storytelling was part of that. As to the miracles, that's also part of it. You couldn't really write a text in the ancient world without referencing and talking about the divine without, in some sense, referencing some sort of proof of it. And those stories that Jesus does, that's all part of that tradition. Let's think, though, about what the stories have in common. The feeding of the 5,000, the fish in the lake, the provision of wine, the wedding of where there was only water. They are all about providing abundance where there is little.
And so, I keep asking you the same question. Why then is there a book in there that does the opposite? I.e. Leviticus.
You mean St. Paul and Leviticus?
Yeah, where's that coming from?
So this is part of a kind of extended technical discussion, and that is something that's in the book. I would encourage people when reading that to read it slowly and carefully, because I had a conversation with my editor about this, actually, to your earlier point about asking Siri for help with what some of the words mean. I had an extended discussion with my editor about how we were going to present this material. I could have made it simple. I could have made it, I could have airbrushed everything over, but no. I wanted to make sure that people could access the scholarly arguments if they wanted to. So I would encourage people, if they want to know the nuances of that discussion, go to those pages, go to the Old Testament chapter, go to the stuff about Leviticus, go to the stuff about St. Paul, read it slowly, read it carefully, engage with it, follow up on, there are little footnotes that tell you other things to read if you want. Go through that and go through it carefully, because you have a right to understand the nuance and the complexity of their argument. I mean, everyone wants the world to be simple, don't they? They want the world to be truncated into these little categories. The world is not simple. And it is not honest of an academic to say it is and to say this is the simple answer. So read it through carefully, piece it together bit by bit. Enjoy that process. It's a slow one.
I guess one of the central arguments is that when wealth equality is low, queerness is also attacked, right? Would you say that is
when
the
wealth
biggest
inequality
finding?
is high? Yeah.
Right. Is that the biggest finding, would you say?
I'd say that's a really important one for our politics as well. But there are lots of other things that I want people to take away from the book, which is it is okay that these ancient texts are complicated. They're not going to tell you something that's absolutely right. It is also okay that you read a book and that you work through it carefully. It's okay that you read a book in bits as well. I didn't want to patronize anyone who is reading this book or listening to this podcast, because things are complicated and we don't deal with the world by pretending it's simple and chunking it down and making it easy and losing in that process so much of the reality of things. That's not how we proceed. So I hope that people enjoy it. And also there's a lot of sex in the book. It was really fun to research.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, I was like, oh, am I turned on by these ancient?
Yeah.
Actually, to be honest with you, I even searched online. I was like, I wonder if there's any like anime of ancient Greek porn. There isn't, not that I found.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but I was like, that would be quite fun. Yeah, it's amazing. It's such an important, but I'm guessing you didn't do the same thing, Dan.
No, I was interested in the porn parts though. That was interesting, and I think, not that I'm a historian, but surely they. I mean, we sort of talked about it earlier, but surely they were jerking off to this stuff, because if there's nothing else,
very possibly.
Yeah,
very possibly.
But
as
also,
we know from Diogenes the Cynic, there was a lot of.
But also, and here's another thing. I just like, every time we start speaking, we come up with like another 20-minute tangent. It's pretty horrible to be a woman in this time. So it doesn't surprise me that men had adorned pots with those of naked men fucking, because women were just being treated like subordinates.
Yeah.
Which, we still see today in certain countries, but also even in our society, in terms of the patriarchy. And I think even then it was much worse. So we're sort of celebrating these porn pots, but it was probably quite traumatic to be a woman, and those pots probably...
It would have been terrible to be a woman.
Those pots would have been like part of that oppression, right?
Yeah, I mean, we think that a lot of women were veiled, for instance. We think that we don't know that.
Feels like The Handmaid's Tale, like they were just used for babies,
Yeah,
and if they had a girl, the girl would be murdered because they were, seen as not important. So, I mean,
and the interplay between misogyny and homophobia is a really, really old one. So many of the texts that I cite from talk about how gay men are basically women in male form, and it seems that the underlying assumption there is that would be bad.
Right, and so if you were a bottom and you were being fucked, you were just as bad as a woman.
Yeah, I think that my copy editor said to me that there are something like 300 uses of the word bottom in the text, and the word top appears about 6 times. That might be suggestive of quite how much they hated that womanly position. And you notice in Leviticus, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is an abomination. What exactly that means, the mankind and womankind stuff, we could argue about for hours.
But could mean top bottom.
Oh, people have said that. I mean, I won't be drawn on it, because part of my job is part of my job as an academic is to present options. I think as an
It's
academic...
funny. You've said I won't be drawn on it
about 8 times,
327 times in this episode.
No, that's true. But like, I feel like that national security advisor to the president that says, "Mr. President, these are your 7 options." Okay, and that's the job of an academic. It's like, guys, these are what you could believe. You know,
But
take
which
whichever
one do you
vote.
believe?
Oh, I'm not telling you that, Joe.
Okay, tell me
All
off
right.
air.
On that note,
Please pre-order the book or buy it if it's out now. Thanks so much, Harry Tanner.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. It was such a pleasure.